Hello, good morning. My topic is all about the Southeast Asian poetry. The first topic is the poetry in China. So Chinese poetry can be divided into the three main periods. The first one is the early period, the second one is the classical period, and the last one is the modern period. So the early poetry is called a book of song. The early poetry is all about the song. So here are the some information about the early poetry in China. While classical poetry, it have as lyrics and it have a poems and rhyme verbs. Also, it called a poetical essay, and the example of the poetical essay is in praise of the king. And the last one is the modern poetry. So the modern poetry in Chinese poem is a free verse. Usually do not follow any prescribed pattern. So the China also have a greatest poets, and the first one of their greatest poet is Li Bai. So Li Bai is a poetic output. He is often referred to as the saint of wine, of the drunken saint. He was born during the Tang Dynasty, probably the northwestern region of China. Although he received a classical education, he went on to behave in a most Confucian way throughout the rest of his life. So he known as the drinking master. Also, Li Bai died at 63 years old, and his example of work would be titled The Drinking Alone by Moon. The greatest poet in China is Do Fu. So, Do Fu admired Li Bai. The difference between the two is, unlike Li Bai, who seems like he had the requisite qualities and contact to dabble in court affairs, and the height of Dofu ambition was supposedly to be a successful official, and yet he was supposedly frustrated in this multiple times. Dofu, he found himself in a pose he found so frustrating, so he wrote I am about to scream. So where he produced a prolific amount of verse, over 1,500 poems. So her example of work is, it is almost as hard for friends to meet as for the morning and evening star tonight, then is rare event. Joining in the candlelight, two men who were young not long ago. So this poem tells us that it's hard to find the true friends in our life. So the third one is Wang Wei. So he attained the achievement of Jiangsu Wan at first place and the civil service examination, and rose through the rank of court music through of his proficiency with the pipa Chinese lute until he became a deputy master of music, a more important job that it sounds. So with the subsequent Tang recapture of Luyang, however, Wang seemingly limitless power of political survival. So him rise to high office, and he enjoyed relative tranquility until his death. The last one is Mao Zedong. So Mao Zedong is influencer poetry recent time with many educated or semi-educated Chinese above a certain age being able to recite some of his most famous line is pretty powerful stuff. Take this for example, a piece written by Mao about terrain the Red Army traversed on the Long March. It's called Liupang Mountain. Next is the poetry in India. So, Indian poet, writer, composer, and artist won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1913 for his collection of poems, Gitanjali, which were described as profoundly sensitive, fresh, and beautiful, with Indian literature making significant stride as well. So Booker Prize winner, a myriad of literature festival, and one of the fastest growing publishing India's industries in the world. So Here's why you should know more about modern Indian poetry. So the first one, poetry brings history alive. India's rich poetic legacy dates back more than 50,000 years in ancient language such as Sanskrit, Prakrit, and Pali, with renowned epics such as the Bhagavad Gita written in. So the second one is poetry thrums with the pulse of billion people. So poetry is a powerful ambassador, a medium through which awareness on the greatest issue can be arise. In a few short stanzas, it can tell a story, convey a message, and bring a slice of the words to you. With over a billion people, India's voice is one that would be here. The third one is the poetry thrives in a diversity of language. So India has 22 official languages, including English, and 398 documented language in total. Can you imagine all the poetry that has been, is being, and will be written? While some poems in India's regional language has been translated, there are treasure troves of Indian verse waiting to be unearthed and explored. And the fourth is poetry shows us English is an Indian language. India is a thriving example of many languages coexisting and having the power to capture an experience in their own way. The fact that English is globally recognized means that the India rich, vibrant, and uniquely Indian verse can be accessible to people all over the world. The fifth is diaspora poets rock as much as diaspora techies. So people of India origin all over the world making strides in science, commerce, and the arts. So India diaspora, the second largest in the world after China's, is estimated at over 25 million people. Poets in this diaspora are engaged in compelling, ongoing, and documentation of migration and growth that is vital in understanding the world we live in. Here are the greatest Indian poets of all. So the first one, Indian poets of all time is Kabir. He's the greatest Indian poet. So Kabir penned poem in Hindi, borrowing from a range of dialect, and wrote on a various aspect of life and faith. A revered saint, Kabir was known for being critical of religion as existed at the time, primarily Hinduism and Islam, and the various rituals they came with. His work echo is criticism and philosophy on what constitutes true devotion. The second is Kalidasa, so considered to be a greatest Sanskrit language poet in India. Kalidasa is widely said to have been from the 5th century, though most details of his life are subject to speculation. So his two epic works of poetry is Kumarasambhava and Raghu Vamsa. The the third is Ghalib, so one of the most influential poets in Urdu. So he started composing poetry at the age of 11, and it was well versed in Urdu, Persian, Turkish, and Arabic. So Ghalib poetry composed in Urdu and Persian probes a range of topics including philosophy, existentialism, and the mystery of life and other subjects. Fourth is Amir Khosrow. So born in 1253, this poet has been called the father of Urdu literature, even though his poetry was primarily composed in Persian. So he is credited with having fused tradition from across the continent to create the Qawwali style of songwriting. And the fifth is the Mirabai. So Mirabai, born on 1498, Mirabai mystic poetry is remembered mostly for his devotion to the Hindu deity Krishna, while several records from the time indicate her having been a highly influential figure in poetry tradition of time. There are no surviving original manuscript of her work. Her poem explore topic of divinity, mysticism, and love, and have been highly influential in setting the tone for literature for centuries to come. And number 6 is Mirtaki Mir, born on 1722. His work did not just set a tone for poetry tradition in Urdu, but was integral to developing the language itself. His work explores them of love and spirituality and is rich with pathos drawn from his own personal strategies, including ultimately deaths of family members, first his father, then his daughter, son, and wife. 7. Ramindranath Tagore. So, Tagore was much more than a poet, having composed highly revered novels, dramas, prize for literature in 1913, largely for Gitanjali, a collection of his poetry that is today among his best-known work. Tagore works explore a range of topics from spiritualism to social realities. That's all my reports. So my topic is poetry in China and poetry in India. So my name is Cyril Ardakas, the reporter of the Southeast Asian Poetry.